Hello. So in our last video we set up some constructors and we talked about how we construct objects in Java. And the really important thing that we kind of hit on was that when we construct objects in terms of a hierarchy, we have to construct from the most generic object to the most specific object. So therefore, if we take a look at wizard w1 equals new wizard, we pass this information to the wizard constructor, and what we do here is the first command is a super call. This super call is a special call which invokes the constructor of the superclass. So the first thing I need to do before constructing a wizard is to construct a player. So we pass h and n, which represents hit points and name, to the player constructor. Now remember, since player doesn't extend anything, that means player extends object. If we don't write extends, it's assumed that object is a superclass. So by default there is a super call as the first line. So if none is written, it automatically invokes a constructor with no parameters. And since that is what the constructor for the object class looks like, that's what's there. And I can of course delete this, and that has no impact on my code. So that was a really quick summary of what we talked about in the last video. But in this video, what we're going to do is we're going to address an issue. And that issue is this. If I run this right now, when I try and print out my wizard or barbarian objects, I get this printed to the screen. Well, the question is, why is that? Now, remember that in our hierarchy, and I believe I have the image right here, in our hierarchy, let's talk about the wizard class. The wizard extends the player, player extends object. So the idea in hierarchies is that at the top here, all the subclasses of object inherit the methods of object. All the subclasses of player inherit the methods of player. So wizard is a player is an object. So if we come into here, and let's just leave those lines down there for a second. If I go w1 dot, I'm going to see a lot more methods than what is actually defined in the wizard class. And we actually can see here, we have a method called attack, and it tells you that's defined in the wizard class. We have a method called equals, which is defined in the object class. A whole bunch, you see some are in the object class. This one is defined in the player class, wizard class. This is the one I'm interested in, the toString method. The toString method is a special method in that it is automatically invoked when we try and print an object to the screen. So what happens here is that when I go system.println w1, toString is automatically invoked. And so what Java does is it's going to start by looking for the toString in the wizard class, not find it. Then it will go to the player class, not find it, and then finally go to the object class and take the instructions of how to print out that object. And what those instructions tell it is to print out the object type at and then some hexadecimal memory reference. This is where the information is stored. This is pretty useless for our purposes. So I'm going to tell you that what I want printed out to the screen is I want the following to be printed out. So if I try and print out any type of character in my game, the first thing I want is I want their name. So I want the name to print out, and then I want, if it's a wizard, I want to know how much mana they have. If it's a barbarian, I want to know how much power. So then mana, and then I want to know their hit points. Actually, let's do it this way. Hit points. So I want name, hit points, mana, and finally circle or clan, depending on what it is. So I've written this out if this was a wizard, but if we were talking about a barbarian, instead of mana it would be power, instead of circle it would be clan. So how do we do this? What we do is we override the toString method. Now let me show you how some students will do this initially, and then I'm going to show you a better way to approach this. So we're going to deal with the wizard class here. And so what I need to do is I need to essentially print out the text name and then access the name field, hit points, access the hit point field, mana, the mana field, circle, the circle field. So if I come into the wizard class, and let's come down here at the bottom, let's write our method toString. So toString has the method header, let's give some space, public string toString, and then the way the toString works is that it returns a string that it then prints to the screen. So right now if I go return this, whatever it is, and I come back to my game runner now and I run my program, you're going to see that when I print out a wizard, I get this, which is not what I want at all. So let's go back into the wizard class, and now let's construct this string appropriately. So one way to do this is by going name, and I could go this dot get name, and this only works if I happen to have a get name method. So I have a set name, so I'm going to say public string get name, return name, public int get HP, return HP. Let's come back to my wizard class, so I go public name get name, and now I want a new line introduced, so I'm going to go \n, and then I said HP colon this dot get HP. Now I want, pardon me, let's go to the new line. So now I want to go \n. And now let's just go to a new line. So we fit this all in the same space. Let me remind myself what I wanted. I wanted name HP mana circles. So go back to wizard. So now we go mana. And now we can go plus mana here because mana is a local field, right? It's encapsulated, so I don't need to use the accessor. And then \n, and then circle, so then plus circle, semicolon. So what this is going to do is it's going to print out to the screen the word name and then access the name field from the player class. Because remember, name is encapsulated, so we can't access it directly. HP, access HP from the player class. Mana is a local field, so we can access it. Circle is a local field, so we can access it. And get rid of that extra semicolon. So now if I come back to my game runner and I run this, there's the generated information about that mage. Or wizard, pardon me. So, I said I was going to do this using a technique that people often use. However, I want to talk about a better implementation of this. It's much better to actually generate the toString component inside of the class that the field is contained. So right here, you see how we access name and get HP, but we use these accessor methods to get it? We actually probably want to generate this part of the string in the player class. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut that out for a moment. I'm going to come into the player class, and I'm going to go public string toString, and I'm going to return that part of it. So notice, return name, this dot get name, and in fact now I don't need this dot this name, I can just go return because I'm in the player class, I can access it directly. Right? So now what I do is essentially the player class part returns the word name with their name, HP with their HP. So now instead of writing all that in here, all I'm going to do is I'm going to invoke the super version of toString. So if I go super.toString, what this does is this invokes the toString in the player class, because remember what super does, it says, okay, look, start looking for this method one class above where I am. And you'll notice now, so watch now, if I run this, I get the same thing. But notice the funny thing here. Do you see it? Watch this. Let's add a space in here. Let's just print a print line. Notice now when I run this, I get name Frank and HP 100. Well, the question is, why is that? That's because by writing the toString inside the player class, now the barbarian inherits that behavior. So when I try and print out B1, what it does is it sort of starts by looking at the barbarian class and it says, nope, no instructions. Then it goes to the player class and it says, oh yeah, there's instructions to do this, and it uses them. So all I have to do now in order to complete the barbarian toString component is take this part, I'm going to take the wizard one, I'm going to copy it, and I'm going to place it in at the bottom here. So now, of course, it's not mana, it's power. And it's not circle, it's, oops, it's clan. And I run this, and there it goes. Now my toString method prints out the information in the way that I want it. So again, let's go back to the way some people do this typically, and then what we want to do. When students first try and do this, they often don't invoke the superclass version of the toString. What they'll do is they'll use accessors to access the name and the hit points, which works fine. But think of it this way. If I have to actually write some code to access the name and the hit points here, I have to write it once, twice. But by writing a toString in the superclass that does that, I only have to write it once. That's really convenient in terms of future modifications to my program, because if someone approaches me and says, listen, I want to change the way that hit points is displayed, had I actually outputted hit points inside the wizard class and inside the barbarian class, I would have had to make 2 changes. But by putting the common component inside the superclass, I make 1 change. Which again, on a scale of this size, not a huge issue, but when your program gets larger and you have, tens of subclasses or even more, suddenly by thinking about this and organizing your code in this way, it's a lot easier to change your program. So I hope this video helped. And in the next video, we're going to take a look at how we can actually make our program do something interesting. Have a great day.